Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us once again on the State of Freedom.
The State of Freedom is a listener-supported podcast. We're committed to pursuing the truth about policymaking, decisions, and situations in Louisiana and at the national level that stand to impact our freedoms.
Please become a monthly supporter of the State of Freedom at freedomstate.us as we continue to expand the voice of liberty across Louisiana and beyond.
Meet the world's first living, full-spectrum, certified organic CBDA hemp extract. Ness's hemp oil was extracted from seed to bottle without chemicals, solvents, or heavy metals, and it surpasses world-class standards for purity. This pure and powerful CBDA has been proven to reduce aches and pains, ease mental tension, and promote better sleep. To get yours today, visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Welcome to the State of Freedom, everybody. Happy Thursday. We are grounded in faith in the Constitution here at the State of Freedom, and we're committed to giving voice to the truth, living with courage, and taking action. It is Thursday, November 6th. It's 10 a.m. Central. I'm Danielle Walker, and I'm joined by my friend and co-host, the watchdog and chief of Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, Chris Alexander, and we are coming to you live on good morning. We're coming to you live on Voice of the People USA TV and Radio Network on Rumble, X, YouTube, and Facebook. You can catch us later if you're listening. If you like the audio version, you can catch us on those platforms always the day after. Well, joining us today is the lead epidemiologist and administrator of the McCullough Foundation. Nicholas Hulscher has been making waves and in the news reporting on landmark findings about the devastating effects vaccines have had on people of all ages. His work is a lightning rod for big pharma apologists, and we're very much looking forward to the discussion. I'm only just a little nervous that we might have more questions than time today. Welcome to the show, Nick. Thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome, Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure. Well, look, we will start. We always like to start out with a scripture of the day to kind of frame the conversation, get us in the right mindset. So today's scripture is Matthew chapter 11, verses 16 through 19. And it says, don't you understand how, this is Jesus speaking, don't you understand how could I describe the people of this generation? You're like children playing games on the playground, yelling at their playmates. You don't like it when we want to play wedding, and you don't like it when we want to play funeral. You will neither dance nor mourn. Why is it that when John came to you, neither feasting nor drinking wine, you said, he has a demon in him? Yet when the Son of Man came and went to feasts and drank wine, you said, look at this man. He's nothing but a glutton and a drunkard. He spends all his time with tax collectors and other affluent sinners. But God's wisdom will be visibly seen living in those who embrace it. And I feel like the Lord brought me to this scripture this morning to remind me that the people living during Jesus's time were basket cases too. The majority of people could not understand the truth when it was right in front of them. They literally called that which was good and true and sent by God, first John the Baptist and then Jesus himself. They called them both evil for different reasons. They said that John had a demon because they didn't like his message and the way he dressed, the way he presented himself. They called Jesus a glutton and a drunk because they didn't like the way that he celebrated life. They didn't like who he associated with. They didn't like the fact that he welcomed everyone to his table. But he gives us the key right here at the end of this passage. He says, God's wisdom will become visible to those who embrace it. And that to me echoes what it says in John 38:32. If you embrace the truth, it will release true freedom into your lives. We're living in the same struggle that Jesus himself witnessed when he walked the earth. But it's our choice and our opportunity to embrace God's wisdom, which is truth.
Yeah. And you know what, Danielle? This scripture is a perfect example of why we should not spend too much time worrying about what other people say or what other people think, because there
That's
are
right.
people in this world with whom, no matter what you do, you simply cannot win. And so it's a waste of time at best to worry too much about what the naysayers say. And at worst, it actually bogs you down with distractions and can really burden you in a way to make you much less effective. So this scripture to me, it speaks to me so clearly. Don't worry too much about what other people think or believe. You
Yeah.
know, you want to take into consideration other people's opinions always, but not too much. And be able to separate the wheat from the chaff. And someone who is doing that on a grand scale right now and dealing, I'm sure, with his share of naysayers, as you said, is Nicholas Hulscher, who's here with us today. And such a privilege to have you here, Nick.
Thank you, thank you. And oh yes, we are currently under nuclear attack words at the moment of defamation and of ad hominem attacks, most of which have no basis and seem rooted in something very inverted, which appears to be what's called vaccine ideology.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so true. And you know what? And when you come out with a study as monumental as the one that you recently came out with, you can only expect to be met with tremendous harsh criticism, not based on the facts, but based upon their own fear that at some point their lies and their misinformation are going to be uncovered, which you are doing. And speaking of which, Nick, this is just so incredible. The recent study in October, which and obviously I want you to speak to this and correct anything that I'm saying that's wrong. An analysis of 300 peer-reviewed studies, 79% of those studies concluded that vaccines are a major risk factor for autism in kids, I think 9 or under. What a powerful, I mean, what an indictment of really the medical, industrial, pharmaceutical complex. Tell us about the study and why it is so revolutionary.
Yes, well, first of all, for 25 years, the establishment, the biopharmaceutical complex, the vaccine cartels have lied to the public and made false claims that vaccines do not cause autism. Uh, they can't make that statement. They could never make that statement based on the evidence we have. And so what we did was we set out to find, well, what's really driving the drastic acceleration of autism among our children. We went from 1 in 10,000 in 1970 to 1 in 1,000 in 1995 to 1 in 31 now in 2025. 20 and 1 in 12 boys in highly vaccinated California have autism. So over 2% of all American children now are autistic. And so this is a very serious situation. We have to get to the bottom of what was causing this. So we literally looked at the entire peer-reviewed literature, got over 300 studies included in our report, and we found a bunch of different risk factors, a bunch of different determinants. And we'll briefly go through them. One of them was older parents. There is a higher risk of neurodevelopmental disease in offspring, if you do have babies at an older age. We found siblings with autism. There's about a 20% chance you will be autistic if your brother or sister is also autistic. We found common genetic polymorphisms or common genetic variants, such as the MTHFR gene, which impairs folate processing. That has been associated with some of these autism outcomes. We identified environmental exposures, such as heavy metals, air pollution, PVC piping leaching PFAS,
Hmm.
as well as many other things in the environment that appear to have an impact on these outcomes, but also in utero drug exposures, such as, and there's many drugs that have been linked to adverse developmental outcomes, about 30 of them. These include antidepressants, SSRIs, SNRIs, anti seizure medications, antipsychotics, Acetaminophen was kind of buried in there, but there's a lot of drugs we have to look at here, and none of them are good to take when you're pregnant for the developing baby. Then we got to gut-brain axis alterations. So plays a key role for sure. We see in a lot of autistic individuals, their microbiome is severely disturbed, their gut barrier is disrupted, and that does appear to be a characteristic of many of these autistic children. But then we got to childhood vaccination, and what we uncovered was quite shocking. There was over 136 vaccine-related studies we identified that looked at neurodevelopmental outcomes. 106 of them found a positive link to autism or other neurodevelopmental disorders such as ADHD and tics. 29 of them found no association. We looked at those 29 studies intensively, and they were riddled with fatal flaws. They don't even have unvaccinated control groups. You can't properly assess risk without a real, truly unvaccinated control group. So that's fatally flawed from the start. They didn't verify the autism diagnoses with an independent physician. They didn't verify the vaccination records. And they also deployed all sorts of statistical tricks to lower any association that would first appear. And we document all of that in our report. But then, and this was the most shocking, was we did find papers with a real unvaccinated control group. We found 12 of them. All 12 of them found, every single one found that the unvaccinated were far healthier in all outcomes. They had less autism, they had less neurodevelopmental disorders, less ADHD, less tics, less brain dysfunction, less asthma, less autoimmune disease, less skin disorders.
Hmm.
They were healthier in all domains in every one of these studies. And then we found 5 case reports and case series documenting the literal patients, real patients, regressing into autism after these vaccines.
Wow.
They
So
get
Nick, so every, just to be clear, every study that was done that specifically had an unvaccinated control group that was compared against kids who had been vaccinated, in every one of those studies, there was appreciably better health with the kids who were not vaccinated.
Yes, that's correct. That's correct. And it's explained by, among those 106 studies that show a link, it's explained by the biological and mechanistic evidence where when they inject these animals with these vaccines, and these vaccines include things such as aluminum, they used to include thimerosal, they include formaldehyde, it's a carcinogen, they include polysorbate 80, which is organ toxic, they include neomycin, a neurotoxic antibiotic, they include fetal DNA that can actually integrate into genomes. This
Can
was
we
all in
talk
these.
about that? Would you mind just getting into that fetal cell line aspect as well? What kind of negative effects are 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 you able to see these fetal cells that are integrating into infants' DNA?
Yeah, yeah. This was a 2015 study. We included this in our report. And what they did was they looked in the vials of a portion of the MMR vaccine. So they looked at not the full MMR, but the measles portion that or the rubella portion that goes into the MMR. And then they looked at the hepatitis B vaccine. So they looked at the vaccines that were derived from or manufactured with these fetal cell lines, which is how they churn out the antigens. They use aborted fetal lung tissue from decades ago to literally churn out these vaccine antigens. And so they looked in the vials and they found trillions of fetal DNA fragments were in these vials, trillions. And so that's all going directly into the child who's receiving these vaccines. And then they did another test in that study to see, well, can this DNA, can these fragments, can they get into and integrate into a human cell? And they found that yes, they can. They integrated into these human cells in the test tube, sometimes accounting for almost one or over 5% of the entire genome became this aborted fetal cell DNA.
Wow.
So,
Wow. Nick,
yeah.
Chris and I were
Unbelievable.
in a meeting a couple of years ago where someone pointed to this as a possible source of kind of sexual identity confusion. Do you have any indication as to whether that would be a reasonable conclusion to draw?
Yes, yes, it's definitely possible because especially when you start crossing genders, different gender genetic material, if that is integrated into your own DNA, it's definitely plausible that this could play a role in this severe gender dysphoria where all of a sudden these children think they're, these little boys think they're girls or these little girls think they're boys. It's possible now. That needs to be studied. Nobody studied that, but it does appear to be biologically plausible. But we also have to remember that where it integrates into the genome is literally specifically associated with autism. So where it's inserting are the points where it's been previously established that are for genes related to autism and are increased in autistic individuals. And so, and one other thing regarding the gender dysphoria is a large number of transgender individuals are actually autistic. And
Mm.
so when you start making all these kids autistic with these large batteries of vaccines, that will also induce gender dysphoria.
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, Nick, just to be clear here, you're not suggesting that. Well, first of all, let me ask you this. Let's just assume someone wants to get a vaccine, but they don't want the vaccine to be lined with fetal stem cell lines. They don't want that in there. Would someone who's getting a vaccine know? Would they know whether or not it contains fetal embryonic tissue?
You will be able to infer if the vaccine you're looking to receive contains it if you have to look up how that particular vaccine is manufactured. If it's manufactured using fetal cell lines, it will likely include this DNA. Sometimes they use insect cells to produce these. They use all sorts of different methods, but what you want to look for is, were human cell lines used to produce your vaccine? And if they were, it's going to contain DNA fragments.
And which makes the vaccine even more dangerous than ordinary vaccines, which are also dangerous. But it's even worse if it's got the embryonic stem cell lines contained in it.
That's correct. That's correct. Because
Wow.
yeah, it adds in all sorts of new implications that nobody's ever studied except that 2015 study and maybe a few others. But we really don't know what it exactly will do to children. But it correlates. We have to remember with the 1986 Childhood Vaccine Injury Act, when vaccine makers got full legal protection, liability protection, that's when all of a sudden we went from about 7 vaccines to now 80 or to now 72 doses by age 18, 32 doses by age 2, none of which were properly tested. And
Yeah.
so all of this compound vaccination of all these different biologically active toxic materials into uh, developing infants who are undergoing critical neurodevelopmental periods will induce central nervous system damage,
Wow.
will cause brain inflammation, encephalitis, will destroy the neurons in their brain, and they will unfortunately regress and develop autism.
So this is not speculative anymore, Nick. If it ever was, it is clearly not speculative at this point. And it makes me wonder, you know, of course, pharmaceutical companies are going to be less rigorous in determining the extent to which these vaccines harm children if they don't have to worry about ever being sued for it. And that's another thing that the medical establishment and the pharmaceutical establishment never seems to mention. Lawsuits have a very important regulatory effect on corporations generally, knowing that we could be sued for hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, if we get this wrong. The pharmaceutical industry doesn't even have to worry about that. So talk to me about what is in place of being able to bring a traditional lawsuit in order to compensate people who have been injured by these vaccines.
Right, they have something called the vaccine court, where they claim that they will compensate some individuals through this process of deliberations. But I believe they have paid out a few billion so far, but it's not functional, and the pharmaceutical companies are not paying for the immense damage that they're causing.
That's right.
They
They're
seem to be
just,
thriving.
yeah, they're thriving, and they're getting away with this. They can make as unsafe products as they want. They won't be held accountable. They won't go bankrupt if they injure thousands and thousands of children, hundreds of thousands. They'll just get away free with this 1986 act. And so this needs to be rescinded immediately, and force these vaccine makers to finally do the studies they always should have done and make safer products. And we should suspend the entire vaccination schedule right now. Any vaccinations, that should be a personalized approach between you and your doctor, not following some established schedule that is doesn't take into account any risk stratification for any diseases. They're injecting, newborns with hepatitis B.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just it's disastrous.
Yeah. Is there any other professional discipline that you're aware of? Because I'm not aware of it, or any other industry which is categorically immune from real civil liability in the event that they manufacture a negligent product that hurts somebody? I don't know of any other industry that enjoys that civil immunity protection. I think it's an absolute disgrace.
Yeah, nobody else enjoys this. Car manufacturers, vehicle manufacturers,
Right.
aircraft manufacturers, they do not enjoy these protections. So this is the equivalent of, you know, making a terribly designed aircraft, and about 20% or 10% of those who fly, end up crashing and killing the whole crew and the passengers, and nothing happens. They just continue to make the same dangerous aircraft. It's no different,
Yeah,
and so it's got to change.
it
Yeah,
does.
it absolutely has to change.
Yeah,
What about
Chris.
the long-term effects of vaccines apart from autism?
There's many. Just it has these childhood vaccines have unleashed chronic disease among the American population, and this is evidenced by not only the fact that over 50% of children now have at least one chronic disease, and over 60% of Americans have at least one. I believe 40% have at least two. And that not only is that the evidence, but the largest unvaccinated versus vaccinated birth cohort study ever done out of the Henry Ford Hospital system. There was a Senate hearing on that a few months ago. A documentary came out, Del Bigtree, called The Inconvenience Study, and they tracked 18,000 children from birth to age 10, looking at their hospital records, this is probably some of the strongest medical records you will get, because they had to continue to go back to the same hospital due to the plans that they were on. And so the vaccinated over that 10 years suffered 57% of the vaccinated became chronically ill. of those children. Only 17% of the unvaccinated, completely unvaccinated, developed a chronic illness. So these vaccines are unleashing chronic disease among our children, and these include not only neurodevelopmental disorders such as autism, such as ADHD, and such as tics, such as speech delays and speech disorders, but also these autoimmune diseases, the asthma, these impaired immune systems, these skin disorders, eczema, um, IBS, all sorts of terrible things are increased, many of which are considered irreversible in some children, and they'll forever be impacted by these diseases.
Nick, I haven't seen anything on this, but is there any reason to believe that vaccines would cause some kind of metabolic dysfunction and that could be leading to the obesity epidemic?
Yes, yes, that's definitely possible. Particularly, these vaccines are disrupting the gut barriers. This is definitely a real issue we're seeing, and it can lead to diabetes. It
Wow.
can lead to, it appears, obesity if their mitochondria is also damaged. And we are seeing indications as well of this mitochondrial dysfunction in these highly vaccinated individuals.
Wow.
Wow. So you're talking about vaccines across the board, Nick. Obviously, you're not simply talking about the COVID vaccine. You're talking about vaccines generally.
Yes, yes, that's correct. Because again, there's nothing healthy in these vaccines. You're literally injecting directly into the bloodstream, potent toxic materials, and it's just, there's no way to stop it. Especially these infants, they have
Yeah.
underdeveloped detoxification systems called the cytochrome P450 systems, which are not developed yet. Their body can't get rid of the aluminum well. It can't get rid of the formaldehyde. It can't get rid of these antigens fast. And so that's why when they pump all the 5 doses at once, they can't cope. Their bodies can't cope. It goes right to the central nervous system. It goes to the other organ systems. And then they suffer this immunological damage, and they suffer from these chronic diseases.
Yeah. Well, Nick, I can
Yeah.
tell you, I had a personal experience in my 20s. I was being vaccinated to travel to Africa for the first time. And they probably, at the travel health clinic, they probably lined up like 9 different vaccines for me to take. And I looked at the nurse in the face and I said, "Isn't that all toxic? Like, isn't this all basically poison that you're planning to put in my body and charge me a lot of hundreds of dollars for?" And she said, "Yeah." And I was like, "Well, doesn't it seem like that would be kind of harmful to put all of those different toxins that don't necessarily go together in my body at the same time?" And she's like, "Absolutely not. It's perfectly safe." She shot me up in my left arm and my right arm, probably 4 in one arm, 5 in the other arm. I was in DC. I got lost on the way to the metro. I was completely disoriented. I had no idea what I was doing. I woke up the next morning or in the middle of the night in my bed. I had no idea how I got there. The rest of the day was completely blacked out. And the next day when I went to work, people were telling me that I was wandering on the executive floor, just having random conversations with people. That is not something I would ever do. It was so bizarre. And so after that experience, I was like, wait a second. If that is happening to a healthy 20 something, what is it doing to a tiny, tiny little baby?
Right, right. So you experienced it yourself.
Yeah.
You may have suffered, some form of neuroinflammation, resulting in those symptoms. And yeah, imagine a 2-year-old baby that weighs, 5% of what you weighed or even less.
Yeah.
And then, they're bombarded with all of those, even more. Sometimes they get 8 doses at once at some of these
Sick.
vaccination clinics, and it's no wonder that it's poisoning them.
Yeah.
What about Nick? We had Dr. McCullough on last year, and he talked to us about what he calls turbo cancer, the rapid acceleration of disease because of the vaccines. Let's just say some person eventually may develop cancer. Maybe they have a genetic predisposition toward cancer. It drastically increases the onset of those diseases. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, these mRNA injections have unleashed a turbo cancer epidemic. We can say that quite confidently now. And I say that because we'll start with the population studies. Two massive studies came out in the past 2 months. One from Italy looked at 300,000 Italians and followed them for 30 months. The other one was in South Korea. They looked at 8.4 million Koreans over the span of a year. And so we have this sample size is so massive. We have over 8.7 million total sample size where they compare the vaccinated to the unvaccinated for cancer outcomes. The vaccinated, when you combine both of these studies, suffered increased risks of 7 distinct types of cancer, including colorectal, breast, thyroid, gastric, um, all sorts of cancers were skyrocketed in the vaccinated. Overall cancer hospitalizations were up about 27%. Both mRNA and viral vector platforms were found to be carcinogenic. And so this is pretty undeniable. And these studies were robust. They accounted for other variables as well. They accounted for infections, they accounted for age, they accounted for comorbidities. So these were very damning studies. And so now we know that, yeah, at the population level, the vaccinated are suffering all sorts of cancers. But when we go into the biological, which is basically the definition now of turbo cancer, there was a study by Merrick and colleagues in the Journal of Independent Medicine that came out few months ago that defines vaccine induced turbo cancer. And what it is, it's sudden onset, unusually aggressive cancers that either are a relapse of a pre-existing cancer or this new onset that present at first presentation at an advanced stage, and they are very treatment resistant, and the individuals die quite shortly after diagnosis. And we at the McCullough Foundation, in collaboration with Neo7 Bioscience, we found why this happens. In fact, we just had a study accepted for publication in a PubMed.gov index journal where we found that thousands of genes become dysregulated after these mRNA shots in those who suffer adverse events. Thousands, including ones that are critical for tumor suppression. So it's turning off your tumor suppressor genes, P53 and BRCA. It's allowing these cancers to propagate. It's inducing hyperinflammation in the body. It's exhausting your T cells, which can fight against cancer. It's causing vaccine induced, um, vaccine acquired autoimmune deficiency. It's causing VADES. It's a disaster. And so, yeah, these shots do induce turbo cancer in some individuals.
Wow.
Is this deliberate?
It appears it is. I believe it is deliberate because they're still on the market despite thousands and thousands of studies documenting all of this, documenting harm to every single organ system,
Yeah.
documenting death, documenting mass casualty events. Hundreds of thousands have been injured, disabled, or killed. And they're still there. They're still being advertised by state governments to 6-month-olds. They don't mention any of these risks. They post it on their X accounts, these governors. It's a disgrace. And so this appears to be intentional.
It's, Nick, before the show, Chris and I were talking, and I was like, if there is more than 2 or 3 cases of salmonella from a batch of chicken that's that's being sold at a grocery store, they'll recall all of it. Yet these vaccines that are proving to have so much damage, like far-reaching damage to people of all ages, that they are pretty resilient to the numbers. They're pretty resilient to the damage. It's bizarre.
Yeah, yeah. It doesn't matter what the COVID shots are just fully protected. It doesn't matter how many people they injure or
Yeah.
kill. It just doesn't matter. You're right. They pull off Coca-Cola products for some stuff so minor. They pull off protein bars and peanut bars for allergen contaminations, which is obviously important, right? I mean, you don't
Yeah.
want undeclared allergens in these. But when the mRNA shots are contaminated with extremely high levels of cancerous DNA fragments from the manufacturing process, they don't care. And it's now been documented in over 10 reports across the world. So, yeah, these somebody or some entity or some complex, some cabal is preventing these from being pulled off the market, and they're very dangerous.
Yeah.
It's a criminal. It seems like a criminal enterprise, you know. And Danielle and I have talked many times about this, and this has always been just glaring to me. The direct conflict of interest between the agencies in our government that are charged with regulating and supervising the dissemination of these products, and the pharmaceutical companies that give our regulatory agencies so much money. Now, of course, they argue that it's just the CDC foundation. It's not money that goes directly to the regulatory agencies, and it's only for a specific project. But the bottom line is they are receiving a tremendous amount of money from the very industry that they're supposed to be regulating and
Yeah.
from whom they're supposed to be protecting the public. That is to me something that, why is that not something that concerns our public health agencies?
Right, right, because they're bought off. It's called the
Yeah.
revolving door of corruption. 9 out of the last FDA commissioners went on to work for big pharma as top executives. And
Yeah.
so they keep these connections open. This door of communication remains solidified between FDA and Pfizer, Moderna, all these companies, and they just rubber stamp everything. They don't really do any safety testing, and it causes immense harm among the population they're supposed to be protecting. And yeah, this it's crazy that this has happened. It's
It,
absolutely crazy. Now, thankfully, the public's basically woken up to this fact. I know Secretary Kennedy, he's mentioned this now multiple times, but I don't see too much direct action regarding stopping this at this
no.
point in time. It
I
looks
was
like they're still compromised.
Yeah, they're 100% compromised. I used to work for Pfizer. I worked for Pfizer for 6 years in New York. Well, 3 in New York and 3 outside of New York. But anyway, the day that it was announced internally that Scott Gottlieb was being named to the Pfizer board of directors, it was like a town hall meeting that we were having in our department, and people were cheering so hard. They were so excited, and I was like, "This is weird. Like, this is not right." People are excited because their job just got easier because he's gonna deal with the regulators. That is not right. Totally
That's not
bizarre, but
right.
yeah. Anyway,
It is, that's such a great point. So they were excited about the fact that they would have less scrutiny, and that they would not be held to the standard to which the American public deserves in
I
terms of
think I
you
think it
know
was just the understanding. There was just an understanding that all of these different big pharma groups were jockeying for this guy, right? And
yeah,
Pfizer
yeah,
Pfizer happened to prevail in that one. So
yeah.
anyway, do you Would you talk a little bit, Nick, about the shedding issue with the COVID vaccines? It's
Yes.
what's going on with that, and how serious is it?
We think it's pretty serious. There's only been one study that assessed if this was possible, just one. You would think in 2025 we'd have hundreds looking at this possibility, but they don't care. In fact, they probably wanted this to shed onto others. But so this one study by Sue Peters and colleagues, Dr. Sue Peters, this came out about a year ago. They looked to see if shedding was real by seeing did unvaccinated women who had daily contact outside of the household to vaccinated individuals, did they suffer menstrual cycle abnormalities above baseline? And so that's what they looked at, because we know, and there's like 20 studies now that confirm, even by pharma, that these mRNA shots do disrupt the menstrual cycle. So we know that. So when you're exposed to it, we know that that's kind of an indicator that you were exposed. And so what happened was the women who reported to be in close contact to vaccinated individuals did have significantly increased menstrual cycle disruptions and heavier bleeding and irregular cycles. So we know that based on that, that does indicate some of this material, this genetic material or spike protein or whatever else, may have been shedding from those vaccinated individuals through their bodily secretions or even through their breath, such as, because some of this material gets encapsulated in what's called exosomes in the body. Think of them as small little bubbles that kind of trap some of this stuff. They circulate through the body, and that can possibly be exhaled through breath, as well as the spike protein. And if they're sharing drinks, and if the guy's sneezing, or his saliva gets places and then the other people touch it, and that's possibly a possible transmission vector of these mRNA shots. But we need
Wow.
more study. We can't just have one study looking at this, but we can assume that yes, this material is excreted through bodily secretions.
And Chris mentioned that last year we had Dr. McCullough on the show, and during our conversation with him, he talked about, we were concerned about how long do people need to be worried if they took the COVID-19 vaccine, they regret it. How long do they need to be worried that they may suffer some negative health effects? At that time, I don't think he had necessarily any studies to back it up, but he just said his sense from the patients he'd spoken, interacted with, was that if you have not yet experienced any negative effects, that you were probably out of the woods. Do the studies confirm that?
Yeah, there will be a significant portion of people, perhaps 20%, that are probably fully in the clear. They received dud batches, they're called, because there was massive batch variability. Some batches there was no adverse events at all, no serious adverse events, and the mRNA must have been degraded, or there was no DNA contamination. But then there are people who will be at extremely high risk who got what's called hot lots, and many of these hot lots started with the number E. So if your batch number starts with E, that basically stands for excess death risk, because
Holy
these were
crap.
by far the most lethal batches, according to howbadismybatch.com, where you can go check your batch. And so that can tell you your risk long term. If you got a benign batch, there's a high likelihood you could be in the clear. If you didn't suffer any serious adverse event or any severe or any just common adverse event after injection, there's also a high likelihood you could be in the clear. But if you suffered immense pain and a week or two of feeling massively sick, it's possible you could still suffer an adverse event, or what's called a delayed adverse event. And I say that because the FDA has outlined in their gene therapy guidance, you need about 5 to 15 years to know the full safety profile of a gene therapy. Um, so we've reached about the 5 year mark. We need about 10 more years to know exactly what these long term impacts are. And so, yeah, there's different ways you can look. We still don't know the full long-term adverse event profile, but we do know how to look and see who will be at the highest risk.
And so, I guess what you're saying here, Nick, is that for those who are unfortunate enough to have taken the most virulent form of the vaccine, you're saying that in all likelihood, they're never completely out of the woods?
Well, people will be out of the woods eventually, but again, we won't know maybe for another 10 years.
Okay.
Because yeah, remember these were experimental. They've never tested them before for a long period of time. They don't know what they would do. We still don't know exactly what they will do over the long term. A study by Alessandria and colleagues found a 37% reduction in life expectancy if you got over 2 doses. And so we really don't know what they're going to do. That's why it's so important that these are taken off the market immediately. I mean, this is just crazy at this point in time
Yeah.
that they're still there.
About speaking of taking vaccines off the market, when I was doing some research in preparation for our show today, I came across an article from a Dr. Jesse Steer or Steyer, I think is her name, with unbiased, and her group is Unbiased Science, interestingly enough. And the whole point of her article is that the last thing we need to do is to be taking any vaccines off of the market. And I'm going to just read a little excerpt of what she said, and I want to get your response to this. First of all, she calls COVID-19 the most significant public health risk of our generation. She says the COVID-19 vaccine represents one of medicine's most remarkable achievements, developed through unprecedented global collaboration and rigorously tested through clinical trials involving hundreds of thousands of participants. She says, we believe in rigorous testing, but there is a growing tide of misinformation that threatens to undermine this great scientific triumph and broad public trust in medical science. And saying that that people like you, Nick, are confusing legitimate science with the deliberate distortion of data to manufacture public doubt. And that seems to be the prevailing narrative of those who are on this other side of this. Obviously, you disagree with that, but that she's talking about misinformation, and based upon everything you're telling us, what I just read to you is the misinformation.
Yeah, what you just read to me is the misinformation. Um, I don't know what she's talking about, misinformation. These thousands of studies, all the studies I've talked about today, they're all published in the peer-reviewed literature. This is all real stuff. None of this is false. None of this is made up. You know, we're not evil people trying to cause, what they think is the worst thing ever, what they call vaccine hesitancy. We're trying to save lives here. We've seen what's happened to people. We've seen when all these studies have come out. She mentioned the clinical trials. That's been documented in the Pfizer papers, Naomi Wolf, and multiple other studies that have analyzed these trials. They were fraudulent. They hid data. They hid deaths. They changed the cutoff points. And Dr. Stephen Hatfield, he came on my live stream the other day. He said they're probably going to go to jail.
They should.
Yeah. So these trials were not robust. They were fraudulent. And it has led to these mass casualty events.
And it's my observation, Nick, that anytime people are claiming the other side is spewing misinformation, that is just they're the ones who are lying. And if they had any guts, they would just call it lies, because when did the term lies get traded for misinformation? It's ridiculous.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Classic projection.
Yeah, misinformation. Yeah, that's a propaganda term. They always come up with these terms. It used to be conspiracy theorists to kind of discredit people. That doesn't really work anymore. So now they've moved on to misinformation, disinformation, super spreaders. I mean, most people don't buy the garbage anymore when they claim this stuff. But what appears to happen is, first of all, 57% of Americans now, according to a Rasmussen survey, believe that the COVID shots caused mass deaths. So it's majority of the population now understand what's happened. It's only about 15% of people now that are in the camp of protecting these mRNA shots at all costs. And it appears many of those individuals have lost their minds. They may be on dose number 7, dose number 8, and they may have even suffered neurological damage. We've documented that. We had a peer-reviewed paper was published today. I'm going to put it out on our Substack. Everybody can read it. We found 63 serious brain and spinal cord adverse events with these shots, including blood-brain barrier disruption, prion disease,
Yeah.
encephalitis, brain abscesses. So they get these
Oh my
pus-filled
gosh.
lesions in the brain. So that's probably accounting for some of that. It increases cognitive impairment, psychosis, delusions. This was documented in a study by Thorpe and colleagues. So, we have to watch out here, and we can't be taking public health advice from people who are spewing nonsense, putting lives at risk.
Yeah.
Yeah. Is your team in touch with Secretary Kennedy's office about these studies? I mean, he has to be somewhat aware of them. Or do you think that you're giving him what he needs to pull these off the shelves?
We've sent him some stuff. We've sent some other HHS officials, these materials. A lot of them subscribe to our Substack publication, so they get the emails when these studies come out, and so they read them. I haven't seen them do anything about it. I haven't seen them make any moves other than Dr. Hatfield. He canceled the mRNA contracts, and I was sending him some of our studies that were coming out when he was at HHS, and he genuinely cared of following the actual science. But
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody else care too much. So yeah, it appears there's some sort of radio silence going on now on all these studies breaking out. It's time that they confront this. They tell the Americans the truth of what has happened.
Yeah. This may be a speculative question, but do you have any indication, or have you read anybody talking about how the different batches got to different places? Like, were they targeting people based on whether the batch was not bad? Like, or did people who've kind of met their political or ideological goals or agreed with them, would they get like a non-toxic batch, and then the people who maybe could serve as a problem or a barrier to their ultimate goals get toxic batches?
It's possible. It's possible they could have had some sort of, intentional allocation of these batches. We just don't know at this point, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't surprise me. I think a
Oh,
lot of
sure.
these elected officials probably received saline when in all those video shoots when they
Hmm.
were getting these. I don't think they're that stupid. Some of
Yeah.
them are,
Some of
right?
them
Some
are.
of them probably got
If
it.
you're dealing, speaking of whether or not they may have done that, Danielle, deliberately, we're talking about a group of people. We're talking about a cabal that apparently is deliberately poisoning
Right.
the American population with
Yeah.
these vaccines. So, of course, I mean, why would they not more narrowly target it based upon their own agenda or their own political objective? Certainly, it wouldn't surprise me. But Nick, I have to ask you this question. You know, if in fact, which we believe is the case, the medical and pharmaceutical industry are collaborating with our regulatory agencies to peddle something that they know is destructive, as we've been talking about, that they know is harmful to the American people, particularly children. Are they prostituting themselves at the altar of money alone, or is there a broader globalist agenda at work here, whose ultimate objective may be to depopulate the earth. I mean, some people would say that that is just, oh, it's just conspiracy theory. But, there are a lot of people who seem to credibly argue that there is a broader globalist, sinister objective at work here.
Yeah, this appears to be a global objective to reduce the world's population. We have to remember 40% of countries do openly have population reductionist policies in place to reduce their own population numbers and birth rates. They limit the number of children you can have in some of these countries. So it's a very real thing. It's not a conspiracy for governments to want to reduce the population, but it appears there's some sort of transnational cabal that operates through state lines, through country lines, and they're not bound by any governments that would like to see a reduction in the global population. There's many people that have been identified. The obvious ones are Bill Gates, and
Yeah.
because he said in a TED Talk in 2010, he wants to reduce the world population by 15% using vaccines. I mean, those were his own words.
Yeah.
So, a lot of these individuals with loads of money and power, they do seek to lower the population. They do seek to reduce it. And it appears one of those ways was through the mRNA program.
Yeah, and you highlighted that on your X page, a CDC study that was showing that babies are now dying at a 77% excess rate years after the mRNA vaccine. Not that they had taken it, but their mother had taken it. And even the state of Mississippi, you pointed out, has called for a state of public emergency or a public health emergency. Would you talk about that?
Yeah, so this is a very real situation and a very disturbing one where the CDC, according to that data, and somebody named Ethical Skeptic did a lot of data digging and analysis on this and actually identified that since 2021, or actually before 2021, excess infant mortality was on a steady decline for 30 years straight, basically, an overall steady decline. And then right in 2021, literally right after the mass uptake of mRNA in childbearing age women, this infant mortality rate began to skyrocket. And it has not gone down since. We're at the end of 2025. Babies are now dying at about a 50 to 80% excess rate. And it appears to stem from two factors: transgenerational, where some of these mothers incurred genomic integration of this material from the vaccines, and that's transferring to the offspring, resulting in transgenerational serious adverse events. And then we also have teratogenic effects, where the mother was pregnant and they got vaccinated, and then that material transferred through the placenta into the baby and thus directly injured the baby. But both ways, there are signals for both. We don't know which one's contributing more, but the fact that babies are dying now in excess at such a drastic level, states are declaring public health emergencies this long after the mass vaccination campaign, leads us to believe that this is the transgenerational factor, which these mothers who were vaccinated years earlier are now having babies who are dying at a very young age.
Is there anything to point to, or I don't know if there have been any studies, but what if the father was vaccinated and not the mother? Would that also lend itself to some problems here?
Yeah, that's possible as well. Some of this genetic material, if it integrated into the father's genome, it could be in the sperm. And that will also obviously end up in the developing baby
Yeah.
during insemination. And so it can come from both ways, both the male and the female. Again, not one study has tested any of this. We're just going now off of these signals that we have now and the biological evidence that we've seen so far. And it does paint this clear picture, but no government's looking into this that we're aware of. The CDC is not doing its job. It has billions and billions of dollars. It should be looking into this.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
not aware of any efforts to seriously look into this disaster.
And we've discussed, and we think we've, uncovered today, or at least emphasized further why that is the case. And you know, I believe, as you do, Nick and Danielle, that I think, you know, a majority of Americans at this point, if not a substantial majority, both believe that the vaccines have caused, you know, mass harm, but also I think that they are very, very skeptical at this point of anything that our public health agencies say on any health issue. So they really have damaged their own credibility in a way that is probably irreversible at this point.
Yeah, it's irreversible. It's irreversible. They did too much damage and they continue to lie, right? And they had a chance. They had a chance to reverse it. They had a chance to pull these off the market, the mRNA shots. They had a chance to start investigating these vaccine injuries and helping the millions of injured. They had a chance. It's been what, 10 months? None of this has happened.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's getting to a point where it will literally be irreversible to restore any sort of trust.
Yeah.
And the sad part is, I think the people mistrust the government, especially the CDC, but I don't know that the majority of doctors do, which is really concerning because now that's causing a greater breakdown in the doctor-patient relationship because the patient doesn't have any faith that the doctor is actually listening to what the patient sitting in front of them is saying. They're looking at some, policy that's sits behind the patient on the wall.
Right, right. Well, it's been about 99% of doctors have taken at least one dose of these shots, and they've recommended it to all of their patients. So they're too far into it to backtrack. They can't psychologically cope with what they've recommended to their patients, what they did to themselves. It's very hard. And so they will utilize a confirmation bias and just simply cling on to the studies all funded by big pharma that claim they're safe, and they will
Yeah.
continue to perpetuate that lie. And so yeah, that's the most dangerous situation. You're right, the actual doctors are compromised.
So saying, in other words, that you know, this medical decision is something that is safe as long as it is solely and exclusively a decision made by a patient in consultation with his own doctor. Even that is not safe anymore.
It's not safe. So they're allowing these compromised doctors to shoot up 6-month-olds with the gene altering injections. That's not keeping us safe. Yeah,
No.
why are we allowing doctors to still do that? We don't allow the protein bars with the allergens to go out. Why are we allowing this to happen? It's
Yeah,
just ridiculous.
Yeah.
it is.
Is there any vaccine? I think I may know the answer to this, but is there any vaccine under any circumstance that you would recommend?
At this point, no. No, I've read too much, read too many studies. They've done too much research. We know they're not safety tested. We know that there's been literally no placebo testing in the licensing trials for any of these vaccines. So we don't even know what they're doing to people. We're
Yeah.
just assuming they're safe. Big Pharma's just assuming they're safe. And in all the studies that look with these real placebo control groups, we see the immense harm they cause. So at this point in time, I wouldn't take any, at least for myself.
So if a child is born, Nick, and mom and dad say you're not getting any vaccines, no health adverse health effects from completely abstaining from vaccines altogether.
Well, that's what the science shows. That's what these 12 studies that have all looked at that same question, they all show that they will have less chronic disease, less autism, less ADHD, less asthma, less eczema, less everything, less every negative outcome if they don't receive the large battery of toxins when they're small infants. And if parents really, want to still give their children vaccines, it's smarter to wait. You can't batter a super tiny developing infant with this garbage. It's just a recipe for disaster. Other countries have already learned that. Even Japan's already learned that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Well,
like my mom always says, you can't take it out. You can always add, but you can't take it out.
there you go. You can't. Yeah, it's always better to wait and then do it later if and when it seems to be warranted. One thing that I'm not a scientist, but one vaccine in particular that it really has left me scratching my head is this hepatitis B vaccine for infants. I mean, I thought the hepatitis B vaccine was for someone who had been exposed to, some sexual disease or something through the use of dirty needles or through sexual contact, or if the mother has hepatitis B, maybe you give the vaccine to the child. But the last I checked, the CDC is not even recognizing the absolute lunacy of giving a hepatitis B vaccine to a child born of a healthy mother. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, there's no clinical indication for this. There's no indication at all. They're not. I mean, if they really, if they really want to do something, test the mother, right? They're not even testing the mother for hepatitis B. They're just assuming the mother could have it and pumping the babies with these completely unnecessary shots.
It's about a sale.
The STD. I mean, come on, these
Yeah.
babies. I mean, they're not engaging in these acts. They're not using heroin needles. It's another example of the ridiculousness that we're seeing with public health.
yeah. Nick, how do people follow you and the McCullough Foundation?
You can follow me on X at NIC Hulscher. You can also follow my Substack publication, thefocalpoints.com. That's with Dr. McCullough, John Leake, and myself. We post there on the daily. And you can also follow me on Facebook, just Nicholas Hulscher. You'll find me there.
Yeah. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your courage and for your great work, sir.
Thanks for having me.
It was a gift. Thank you for your time, Nick. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk to you.
Oops. I hit the button too soon. Sorry about that, Nick.
It's okay. That's the only mistake you've made today so far, and it'll probably be your last.
I hope so. I hope it's the last. Chris, well, first, I mean, I'm so thankful that he was willing to join us. I know he was feeling a little under the weather, but the material that he is bringing out is just absolutely damning to the vaccine industrial complex.
Yeah, and they don't seem to care. I almost asked him, is there anything that you could put before these people that would wake them out of their, what seems to be this, this deliberate effort to harm the American people? But if they're doing it purposefully, they don't care about the evidence, Danielle, and they probably already know the evidence. They just don't want it. They just don't want us to know it.
I don't know, Chris. I hope that some people will still wake up, but that scripture this morning is really sticking with me, that people who stood in front of Jesus, the Savior, and called him a drunk and a glutton, that if you look in the face of something, that's all the evidence. This is the truth. This is the absolute truth. It doesn't get more true than Jesus. And you can call him a drunk and a glutton, then telling, looking at the data, looking at potentially someone's own child, looking at that, and not being able to just call it what it is.
Yeah. It boggles my mind, the depth of the depravity, the depth of the evil here. It
And
would be bad
deception.
enough. Yeah, the deception. It would be bad enough if they were simply willfully ignorant and maybe didn't understand or didn't know the data, didn't know the harm this is causing, and therefore they were continuing to perpetuate this. But in all likelihood, they have actual knowledge of it, and they're continuing to do it. I mean, that is looking.
By they, you mean public officials
Yes, I'm
and the
talking about public
pharmaceutical?
officials. I'm talking
Yeah.
about the pharmaceutical industry. I'm talking about politicians that fall in line with them and help perpetuate the false narrative. I'm talking about all of them. And it just we're looking straight into the heart of darkness, Danielle, because we're not just it would be evil enough if we were simply talking about adults, but we're talking about the monumental harm that's being done to the most vulnerable and defenseless among us. And you know what Jesus said? He said, Do not keep the little ones from me. And anyone who lifts one hand to harm one of these little ones, you may as well have a millstone tied around your neck and be thrown into the depths of the sea. Well, I
Yeah.
can't think of any enterprise more sinister and that is more directly harming the most innocent among us, other than abortion itself.
Yeah.
This would be right there at a close second.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I just feel like, I guess, an increased burden to pray for people's eyes to be open, Chris, because I know, we've talked to a lot of doctors over the last couple of years, and many of them have pointed to the fact that, if you have to look in the face of what you have been a part of, that's really hard to do. It's really hard to
Yeah,
say that you participated in some great evil. I worked at Pfizer. I didn't sell any vaccines, thankfully. But I know people who do sell vaccines and have to sell vaccines or have sold vaccines. And that's a really horrible position to be in. And so uh, I think we need to pray for people to have the courage to look these issues in the face and say, you know what is past, and I can forgive myself and Jesus can forgive me. But I can't continue to harm people. I can't
yeah,
continue down this path. And that to me is the more concerning thing. If we had reasonable doubt before now, if there was any question about the veracity of studies or the intent of the people behind the studies, I think we've moved past that. We're 5 years on. It's time for people to really take a look at this and say, if there's a chance that this is true, will I keep doing it?
yes. And I think the only thing, Danielle, that would cause them to change course is the recognition that nothing that we've done is beyond the redemptive power of God. Nothing
That's
that
right.
we've done is beyond the towering mercy of our Lord. And it's very difficult to conceptualize that type of mercy and that type of love. But we just have to remember that what St. Paul said, that he first loved us when we were mired in the worst sin, when
Yeah.
we were mired in corruption and we could do nothing to help ourselves. He loved us first. And there's nothing that we can do to earn it. And there's nothing that is beyond his power. My dad used to tell me the story about Dr. Bernard Nathanson, who was the biggest abortionist in the United States for many, many years. I mean, he performed countless abortions and then realized what he had been doing, and that he was destroying a human life with each abortion. And my dad said that when Dr. Nathanson realized that, my dad said he's either going to do one of two things. He's either going to convert to Christianity or he's going to kill himself. And fortunately, he converted to Christianity, and he went for the rest of his life. He spent raising awareness about abortion and about the destruction that it causes. So if Dr. Bernard Nathanson can have a redemptive experience and can experience the mercy of God after performing tens of thousands of abortions, certainly this is not worse than that. So there is hope for each of us and for all of us through the grace of Christ.
That's right. And we've all been lied to, and I think chief among the people who have been lied to are the doctors themselves, right? They paid money to go through a propaganda machine, and to be propagandized and taught and ingrained many, many falsehoods. And so, it's at some point, it's almost hard to even blame them because they have really just been steeping in the propaganda machine for so long. But we all do have a responsibility to take a look at our actions. We can't blame the propaganda forever. We have to take a look at what's going on. We have to take a look at the real data. We have to take a look at the real people's lives who have been affected and say, okay, what am I going to believe?
Yes. And I agree with you, Danielle. I think many of the doctors and many other people have been pawns in the evil machine,
Yeah,
not really the prime movers. But at
exactly.
some point, we have to recognize that we have been lied to, and we have to change course. And I'm just thankful for Nick for raising public awareness, because what he disclosed to us today is just damning for this entire sordid enterprise.
Yeah, and one of the ways that he's more than onto something, we didn't get into this, but I know we had talked about it off air, is that he was all his release of that study was extremely suppressed by X. I think they had to put out kind of a call to people who had big followings to resurrect his study on the algorithm because it was being squashed. And so well, our experience has been that anytime something is being suppressed in the public square, it is it's probably true.
Yeah. We need to have a show, find someone to come on and talk to us about the extent to which X is suppressing truthful information, suppressing the dissemination of information, because I've heard from more than one person that it is occurring, which, at least on the surface of it, surprises me because it's being run by Elon Musk, at least theoretically. But I've noticed in my own social media that I seem to get more traction on Facebook now on many issues than I do on X.
Yeah,
So I know that it's occurring. So we'll have to get someone on who's qualified to talk about that. I think it's a big issue.
it is. I would say that the state of freedom is suppressed somewhat on X, but extremely extreme. The worst place is YouTube. The worst place. We have been absolutely almost made rendered invisible on YouTube.
Yeah. Dr. Randy Russ certainly can feel your pain on that
Yeah, he
because
can.
he has been as well. Uh, but anyway, yeah, how enlightening.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Chris, it's been such a pleasure sitting here with you today. And I think what an opportunity. I'm so grateful that we have the opportunity to talk to people like Nick Hulscher, people who are doing great work, people who have courage, people who are speaking the truth and bringing the truth to light. It's just such an opportunity and a gift we've been given to steward and to bring to the public.
Yes, and we need everyone to continue, all of our listeners to continue sharing and subscribing to the State of Freedom,
Yeah,
because knowledge is power, and we have to continue to spread the word. Uh, Everybody knows now, Danielle, that we are not going to get accurate, reliable, trustworthy information from the power brokers who are in our country, including our own government.
yeah,
So we have to go somewhere to get the truth. And you can get the truth right here, uncensored and unapologetically. So continue to spread the state of freedom, support us, advertise on the state of freedom, and let's continue forward fighting for everything that we know is true and right and good, not only for us, Danielle, but for the next generation, for our
that's right.
kids.
That's right. Thank you, Chris. And God bless you. I'll see you back here on Tuesday.
Sounds good. Have a good day.
Awesome. You too. The secret to losing weight 2 times faster has gone viral. See the transformations hundreds of thousands of men, women, and teens are experiencing around the world with the Slender Eyes drops. These homeopathic hormone balancing drops are proven to control appetite, support thyroid function, improve energy, boost mood, and increase metabolic rate. To learn more about the drops or other incredible natural wellness and lifestyle products, email me at danielle@freedomstate.us or visit the Shop Our Partners page at freedomstate.us. Hey, Danielle Walker here. I'd love for you to check out my online boutique, Lux Lion. My mission for Lex Lion is to showcase innovative African designers and sustainable, mission-driven brands. To do that, I bring you stunningly beautiful handcrafted jewelry and accessories from some of my absolute favorite places on earth. Small batch wholesale for storefronts is also available. Join me in celebrating African artistry and shop now at luxlion.us. Use promo code FREEDOM for an additional 10% off your purchase. Thanks for joining us today on the State of Freedom. Be sure and check out the show notes for this episode. You can always go there and find the calls to action and resources mentioned in the show, and you can find out more information about our advertisers there as well. If you want to learn more about us or support our work, visit freedomstate.us. To get involved with Louisiana Citizen Advocacy Group, visit lacag.org. We'll see you next time. God bless.